Welcome. I'm Jessica Lane, host of the Data and Education Podcast.
And we are Lorna Hewson and Kurtis Hewson, hosts of the Building a Culture of Collaboration podcast.
In today's bonus episode, we're chatting with Principal Christopher Graves, a seasoned school leader passionate about structured improvement for students. Chris learned the power of tracking data the best way by doing, building a skill set from his love of sports stats to make real impact in areas like school culture and chronic absenteeism. He's all about finding that data is both powerful and practical for his staff.
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference. In building a culture of collaboration, Kurtis and Lorna Hewson will share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
So welcome, Chris. Great to have you here.
Thanks. Glad to be here today. Thanks for taking the time to chat.
And Jess, you'll really like that I use data and data
in the same
interchangeably
paragraph.
in the same
I
paragraph.
didn't even notice. And you know what? We did forget our last guest, Dr. Wainwright. We forgot to ask her data or data. So we have to ask you, Chris. Is it data or is it data?
Geez, I don't even know which I find
You
myself.
will be judged.
Now I'm thinking it. I'll consciously notice what's coming out of my mouth, but I think data. Yeah. Interesting. This complicated language of ours. Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of those things that you don't really realize until someone makes you realize it. And then I think I say it that way.
Yeah.
It's interchangeable for sure.
Yeah. We all get it. We
Chris,
all understand.
Yeah. Love for you to share just a little bit of your background before we jump right into asking you more about data, numbers, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks. So data is something I've been working with a lot in my role, and I've been working with colleagues a lot on it. And it all goes back to, like you mentioned, like I think when I was a child, I was just always intrigued by sports statistics. I'd open the newspaper, how many earned runs did this pitcher receive? So then what does that make their earned run average over the course of the year? It's just like as a, 10, 12-year-old, it was just intriguing to me. And then when I joined the teaching profession right out of college, I was a music teacher. And so a lot of my work didn't necessarily involve data, but it was my passion, right? And then when I started to see, okay, in my corner of the universe, I can teach my kids, but if I can expand my work, maybe I can affect the whole school. I see the school burning around me, and I'm not just going to sit here and do without doing something about it. So that's what fueled me into school leadership. But then when I became interested in school leadership, even as a music teacher, collaborating and leading a department, I started to realize, well, my data, my outcomes, my student learning, everything that I'm doing is different than the math, the reading scores that are the highly accountable data. So I have to learn their language. I have to learn what are the reports? What are the dashboards that are populating with information on student growth? How can I tie into that and benefit that and show value added? It's not just music for music's sake. It's if we're really living that mantra of like, it causes more connections in the brain, students are better learners, then let me show it in the results. Well, I have to understand that language to do it. So that's kind of like both of the things that propelled me into wanting to be a leader, to affect the whole school, and to really understand how data is used. So it's, I think there's that, all these terms change. We used to say data driven. No, we're like student driven, emotions, relationship driven, but the data helps us understand, are we getting there?
Informed, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
And people driven.
Yeah. See, we know. Yeah.
All right. Who's gonna tell Chris about the music connection?
Okay, so
I don't know if you noticed us.
In our
we're all like
7 days episodes, we've discovered that everybody either has some connection to Chicago or began their career as a music teacher, and you check both boxes.
Yeah, there we go.
Well done.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Wild.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And there's not that many of us. Like
right.
Leadership that have my resident principal here. I have a principal in training. It's called a resident principal, like a medical residency, right? And he has a music background too. So it's
so
it's kind of, I think, how he and I connected so well. So yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's funny.
So, Chris, I'm super interested because I was the same way as a kid, getting really infatuated with statistics and numbers from sports.
Hockey mostly.
Yeah, well, Canadian. I have to fit that
Canadian.
stereotype.
Okay, absolutely.
So I would love from your experience how that passion in tracking stats that you alluded to earlier, what are some of the transferable hands-on approaches that you take now that you think were influenced by that early interest and has influenced the way that you now talk about data with your staff team?
Yeah, so there was even a point where, like, talking about making it practical and making it tangible. There was even a point at my last school. I jumped over large parts, of my background just to stay focused here. But yeah, I was assistant principal at this school, and then assistant principal at another, and then principal at one school, and I'm principal now at my second school. And there was a time at my last school where I wouldn't even use the word data for a while because it became like a dirty four-letter word.
Yeah.
And I get it. My first year there, it was a blue ribbon school, and it had kind of fallen from like highest test scores and outcomes to, still really good, but a noticeable change. And so, well, when you look at the data, it's like, oh, well, if we do certain things that affect these data points, we will get there. And we did in one year. But it kind of led people to think like, oh, is he or certain other people only just focused on data? So well, you know what? How about let's just stop saying it and let's just do the work instead and let the results speak for themselves. And it really did work. So really what that taught me was how to do the work without focusing on the spreadsheets and the numbers. Like those have a role, but it's also that, like those of us we were teachers, we know teachers only have these specific times of the day to do new learning or dig in on that because the rest of the day they're with kids, right? And we have time to sit with spreadsheets and we have a lot on our plates, but we have time to discretionarily decide more of this or that. So like one example that I use here a lot is the tardy capture system, morning arrival. When kids walk in, I was noticing, when you get those occasional emails that say, hey, so-and-so was marked absent, but it was a mistake. Or so-and-so called the office and said they got the robocall saying their kid was absent, but their kid is actually in school. And after once or twice, it's like, well, humans can make mistakes. But after like 3 or 4 times, let me just go stand out there at a stand-up desk with my computer and, oh, I noticed something. Oh, I noticed something. Oh, that kid slipped past the line, not being mischievous, but it's just not set up right. And all of that comes down to like data capture and data tracking, right? I mean, it's human beings, but where does the accountability come from? It comes from all this massive data across 600 schools in our city that are then fed to the Illinois State Board of Education that then rolls up into our state report card, our summative designation each year. And so if all these human beings are very well intentioned, but the numbers aren't ending up in the systems that go there, then this is the reality, but it's not showing here.
Yeah.
So we gotta fix that. So then I mean, there's all sorts of little things I talk about with people that I'm working with in like the courses I teach on like, so let's talk about what gaps there might be. Let's talk about how to fix that, not just the technical, but the leadership side of it. How do I motivate my people to fix it so I don't make them feel like idiots? Because they're not. They're so well-intentioned, but there's so much going on, and I'm the leader that's supposed to be having their back, helping them find the best outcome, So it's a lot of little things like that. And that's just one example. I'm sure there's 50 of those across any of our schools where we can see opportunities for
awesome
enhancement.
Yeah, I agree. And you kind of touched on this already, but I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that in terms of like navigating that balance to make sure that you are able to still get stuff done using data, but without overwhelming your team. And you mentioned, just taking the 4-letter word out of it and just getting down to it. Is there anything else that you think has kind of helped you balance that?
Yeah, there's a couple angles of it. Is one thing I always think of is like, what's easiest for the person running the data or preparing the data of some kind, right? Whether it's a spreadsheet or a report or something like that. And then on the other end, the person who's going to be using it, it needs to be easy for them. And a good example is we're rostering our students for next year. So I'm exporting information from our student information system, and I can sort it on a spreadsheet of here's this homeroom, this homeroom, this homeroom, this homeroom, and make it that you can just, I could put a little drop down in there and say, should they go into this classroom or this classroom, type a few comments as to something about some rationale if you're recommending something different than what the district would recommend. And that's easy if I just put it all on one tab, like all 500 some kids in our school. But the teachers, understandably, like I said, right, they only got those they got their lunch and their prep period, and then they got grading and all sorts of stuff outside the school day. They would much prefer that it be on separate tabs for them. So I can just click on my tab and there's my kids. And I'm always stuck. I'm like, I really want to do that, but that takes me 18 times longer because now I have to pull all the data, get it all in order, and then copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste onto separate tabs for all of them. And there's probably ways to automate and do some of that stuff, but either way, like that's where I'm always stuck. And I can see people at our district office doing the same thing for us, running like automations and macros or mail merges that push information out to us. Or sometimes we have to go dig for it and find ourselves with little drop downs and filters and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the crux that I'm always dealing with. Like I'm like our attendance plan was on a spreadsheet. And I think just visually it was a lot for teachers to see it all on like rows. So now I just basically took that same information, but put it on a Google Doc with a table and a table and a table. And it's just, I kind of saw the sigh of relief from the staff that they're not looking at one more spreadsheet. And that's not like tracking information. It was just like the layout.
Right.
So fine. Graphic design wise, it'll be fine. But sometimes, it is going to, when I'm looking at our who have a D and an F, it is going to need to be on a spreadsheet. It is. So I'm just trying to make it as digestible as possible.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, people don't understand how much of a cognitive load it is to have to look at something and figure it out. And I'm getting very distracted by this puppy behind me. Sorry.
Wagging, yeah.
He's very active right now. But that's why I love the book Storytelling with Data by her first name is Cole, and I can never remember how to pronounce her last name. It has a hyphen in it, but it goes through, how to create visualizations in a way that takes some of that cognitive load away. And I think that's so important, especially when we're talking about a group of people who, like you said, they don't have the time. So every little thing that we can do to help is so beneficial when it comes to this process.
I used to have the same dichotomy for myself to Christopher of, okay, it's going to take me a half hour to get this ready, but it's probably going to save 20 minutes per person of angst and error. And you'd have to balance that out to go, okay, if I can help my team to get to so what are we going to do conversations quicker, then that is helping in a really monumental way, not just for individual teachers, but for our overall system.
The other thing is that there's always the consideration of how we represent the data and how that impacts our culture. So that really is an important consideration when you're trying to figure out, do I amalgamate it or do I pull it apart?
Yeah. I'm constantly thinking about that. And I try to get feedback from the staff too on, how, but also trying to figure out how to push back. If like, well, can you put it on separate tabs? Like, how do I point out that that's going to take 18 times longer for 18 without making it sound like it's about me? But at the end of the day, like I got to sleep too, so.
I always love those when you have those requests and what comes out of your mouth is, I could look into that. And in the back of your head is, goodbye, Sunday.
I'm trying to think of how to make that efficient and effective.
Exactly. Well, Chris, you've worked on implementing data-informed efforts around school culture, chronic absenteeism, and instructional growth. Can you share a specific example of how data insights led to a specific positive change in one of these areas at your school?
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
Looking for practical strategies to use data effectively? Imagine classrooms where learning is personalized, student success is driven by insights, as school culture thrives on informed decisions. Join us for Data in Education, a virtual summit on June 10th and 11th. Discover new strategies from fellow educators and experts on data visualization, data culture, and data literacy. Learn how to create actionable dashboards, foster a positive data-informed culture, and use data to track and celebrate student growth. We are also super excited that Kurtis will be the keynote speaker for this event. This virtual summit is for educators, school leaders, and anyone else who wants to increase their impact on student success. Don't miss this opportunity to learn and collaborate with educators from all over. Register now at bit.ly/Data Summit 2025.
And now back to our conversation.
Yeah. I think one interesting thing about that is like any of us, any school we go to, what's that? There's a couple of phrases like what gets focused on gets done, right?
Yeah.
And I oftentimes say if you're focused on everything, you're focused on nothing too, right?
Yep.
So I talk, at one of my last schools, Marie Curie Metropolitan High School in the Southwest side. It was school culture and climate. It was fights. And I remember when I started there as assistant principal, I didn't have a background in that stuff, but I said to someone to the principal about how it wasn't like, I can tell it's not going well. You can tell. And she said, do you want to be in charge of it? And I said, sure, I'll figure it out. And and it was, by the time we celebrated the hard work, it was over 100 people. It's a school of 3,000 students. So by the end of 3 years there, it was 100 people that we all kind of pulled together and celebrated the drastic number of reduction in. We had around a fight every other day before I got there, and after 3 years, it was 20 fights all year. It's still a tough high school, but now I was joking with the principal. They used to have the most arrests in the whole state of Illinois before we got there in like 2014. And I was joking with the current principal there. We were assistant principals together. I moved on. He became principal a couple of years later. And he said, yeah, now the only way you'd get arrested is if you're literally like killing someone. Like they handle things in a very humane,
Different way.
pathetic way. There are still consequences, but it's also a drastic reduction in behaviors that would result. It's not that we're just sweeping stuff under the rug. It's that they figure out how to respond. So here we've been doing that with chronic absenteeism. But I'll be honest, like I'm in my second year. In my first year here, we didn't really do much with it for the first like 4 or 5 months because I was new, keeping my ear to the ground, building relationships that for, the first 90 days, first impressions, all that kind of stuff. And there's so much information, so much data to take in that when I'm seeing the data, but I'm seeing a lot of different data. And then eventually after a few months, I kind of felt like I understand this place. I understand these families enough. I understand this staff, and I definitely understand this data, and I know what I'm looking at. And so the year before I got here, I think 39% of our students were chronically absent, defined as more than 10% of their days. They're not here for any reason, right? At the end of last year, it was 29%, and we're very, very steadily holding at about 18% right now. And it's very specific things. It's a barrage of communication methods. And I think one I like to call out is, it's just constant communication to families about the importance and trying to think of, well, if they think this, how do I counter that message in a way that really resonates with them? It's not manipulating. It's not pressure. It's just like, it's pressure, but in a very important way. Right. And so I sent a message to my local school council, which is like a school board at each school. And I said, here's a mail merged message that'll go custom to the families of blank. Your child has missed this many blanks, this many days, with a blank. And they said, this message is too strongly worded for our kids, for my kid in particular, because my kid has great attendance. And you're making it sound like they need to improve. My kid's been here like 98% of the days. Okay, good point. So I workshopped 3 different versions of the same letter. The strongly worded, your child can miss no more than 2 days from now until the end of the year, if it's like February. The moderate, where it's like 89 to 91%, like it's okay, but that's still by the end of the year, like 17 days they've missed. And the kids who will remain eligible for all of the prizes and incentives because your child has had great attendance. Thank you. Congratulations. all of that. And so then we do 3 different versions of the mail merge letter. We put them into piles for each homeroom and just teachers hand them out. So it's a lot of like main office operational stuff. And then I message families on our communication channel saying the letters are coming home. My community doesn't do well with emails. We have 30 different languages spoken. So the message goes out saying the letter is coming home, and it goes out in their native language. And then when the letter comes home, it's not in every language, but they can use translation at home at that point, and they prefer the paper copy. So, but I mean, that plus 20 other things, but that's one of the main things, just communication, tying it to things that matter to parents. And they start to realize like, okay, I want them to say it back to me. I want them to see me outside and go, okay, Dr. Graves, we know attendance is important, but we have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, the fact that you know it and it's a doctor's appointment, did you make it as early or late in the day as possible? Okay, thank you. We'll see them here for at least half of the day. You know, like they're saying it to me because they know I won't stop talking about it.
Yeah, and I do want to mention real quick that you're going to be talking a lot about this in your summit presentation as well, and that's tackling chronic absenteeism, leveraging data and implementing proven strategies. So I just want to give a really quick plug. Never knew those 2 words were hard to say back to back. And that everyone know that that's going to be on our first day, June 10th at 3 p.m. EST, so Eastern time. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing with what you're sharing there, Christopher. I mean, being able to get specific and even segmenting messages, I mean, that would be next to impossible to do if you didn't have a solid data set to be able to pull from. And again, we see this all the time, that without data, we might be sending a blanket message to everybody saying, hey, attendance is so important. And those that are attending well are going, well, duh, but oh my goodness, now I'm worried about that one day that I had back in October where anyone else is, oh, okay, good. Other people are missing time too. Like the blanket doesn't work, but the data that you have helped to get some really clear targeted messages.
But beyond that is really understanding your community too.
Yeah. And there's a lot to that. I mean, I could go on and on about like, I have a number of staff who work here who have kids here, right? I mean, a lot of schools do, right?
Yeah.
And they come from these same communities, the Rohingya community, Afghanistan, Syria. And so oftentimes I'm pulling them in there and giving a preview. And sometimes they'll say, you just need to tell them, just tell them this, you know? And then others will say, well, you have to understand what they've gone through. Like all of that is so helpful, right? It's not qualitative, because then when they're getting the letter from me, there's something in our system called the attendance nudge letter. And it's a very formulaic letter. And I always tell my colleagues, like, use it. Don't not use it. I send it out a couple times a year, but it feels very formulaic and very district, you know, like, you know, your child, if you have a child, your child comes home with something that feels very standard from the school at times.
Yeah.
This one is different. This one is very personal. I'm always trying to think like, okay, we've had some flu sicknesses. So let me tie something about that into the letter about, you know, thank you for keeping your child home if they are infectious, but a mild sickness that is not infectious is not a reason to keep your child. Like I'm going to hit on all those things so that each time they see the letter, it feels like with your child's name at the top and their number of absences, it feels like I wrote you a letter. And that's how I want you to feel. That's the kind of connection I want us to have between school and home. This is about your child. It's not about me running a report. It's about me reaching out. Hey, knock, knock, knock. Are you doing okay? You know?
Yeah.
Love it.
So I'm curious, Christopher, and with your different administrative experiences and backgrounds, how would you respond to a school leader who wants to build a stronger data culture, but is worried about, man, I don't want to add one more thing onto the plates of my teachers. I know how busy everybody already is. What's one piece of advice that you could give that leader around building a stronger data culture without feeling like they're overwhelming even further? We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you feeling alone when it comes to addressing the needs of students in your classroom or in your school? We realize that every child has their own unique set of needs. How do we possibly attend to each and every student in each and every curricular area and in each and every circumstance? Simply put, you can't do it alone.
We were feeling the same way in our school, but we were determined to find a different way
to support the needs of each and every one of our students. Through much trial and error and studying the current research on professional learning communities, response to intervention, and much, much more, we developed a framework that would support not only the students in our building, but every staff member as well.
Collaborative response is a framework with 3 essential components: collaborative structures and processes, data and evidence, and continuum of supports. With careful implementation of these intersecting pieces, your school can live the belief that every child deserves a team.
Get the introductory chapter of our best-selling text, Collaborative Response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners, for free. This chapter also includes a link to the companion website with numerous resources and templates related to the framework.
Go to bit.ly/C_R-intro to access the chapter. That's bit.ly/C_R-intro. Join the thousands of schools implementing collaborative response and seeing incredible levels of success for all students. And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, there's a couple things that go hand in hand that I think about with that a lot is, one, I think wherever you're at right now and whatever you're planning on doing in the next few weeks or months, I always say, call that year 0. That's your year 0. That's where you're at right now. And you want to get to year 1 and then year 2, 3, 4, right? By years 2, 3, and 4, you've got systems and structures and routines in place and you're just refining them. And then by year 2, 3, 4, you get to look back and go, wow, it kind of feels like it's always been this way. But I remember just a short while ago, we were in this place.
Yeah.
But year 0 is where you're kind of figuring things out. You're piloting something. You're looking for low-hanging fruit or quick wins. Like tightening up on your morning arrival is not a huge lift for some of it. To say, like, let's just put the stanchions right here so kids can't slip around them. Kids have to walk through this kind of like little alley to get their tardy slip and go to class, and the tardy slip captures their tardy, so parents won't erroneously get the robocall. And then you get to say it celebratorily in a newsletter and say, hey, guess what? We just solved a big problem that was a headache. And then that's the other part of it is that I try to look for, speaking of like quick wins, I try to look for quick wins with the staff. An obvious one that I like to say a lot is I just listen. And then when I hear a few little nuggets I can use, like, oh, so-and-so isn't here again. Oh, so-and-so is always tardy. And so-and-so's mom always has an excuse, right? So then I get to go, okay, that's what I keep hearing. So then I go back to those teachers and I say, you know what? It sounds like that's one of your biggest headaches is when Johnny isn't here in school, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to do something about that. I can't promise. I'm not a miracle worker. I can't promise. But when you take 100 kids across the whole school, if we focus on this, I bet we're going to make some of those headaches go away. And then, yeah, it works. It happens. And then you get to come back a few months later and say to the whole staff, I heard you. I walk around this building and I listen and I hear constant complaints about attendance. Now, we didn't solve it all, but we're 30% reduced. That's
look at the growth
out of 100. And then they're like, oh, geez, yeah. And you don't want to have to reteach that lesson. So all I need is one thing from you. I'm going to handle all this, but I need one thing from you. And so now they're seeing the attendance plan that has this. And if I just say, hey, can you just help with one part of it? It's really hard for them to say no. I get it.
Yeah.
They all have a lot on their plate. But if I'm just asking for the one thing, I need you to periodically have a conversation with that parent because you have a superpower we don't. You know exactly how it's affecting their attendance or their academics when they're not here. You can say it in ways I can't, right? So that's kind of how I frame it is like you're a piece of the puzzle, but when you broaden out and look at the whole thing, I just need you to help with one thing and it'll make your headache go away.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it feel a lot more like a collaborative response to the, not to just sprinkle those words collaborative response but it really does feel like it, you see that big picture and you see everyone's doing this. Okay, if I'm dropping the ball, then it's not going to work. So I need to, give my part, do my part so that we can make sure that this all comes together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think one of the keys there, Christopher, is helping people to see that complex systems are made up of small sometimes simple parts. And
Yep.
it doesn't mean that everybody has to completely change how they're going about responding and interacting with students. But like you said, this one little piece, but hundreds of one little pieces leads to monumental shifts
Yeah.
for us over time. And again, I love you tying it back to the data to be able to say, okay, through this, over the last 6 months, we've seen a 22% increase in attendance. That's massive, and it's all because of the work we're doing. Now let's try and get that even further down. What could be our
and
next
really
step?
celebrating that growth.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting, I mean, here we are almost at the end of the year. Like I mentioned right before we started recording, our annual test score data came out. We also have an annual like school culture survey that we administer. That's looking good. So things like that. But it's also like, I think what we know is a lot of our staff, the number doesn't mean as much to them as the story, right?
Yeah.
Like when you can pull out. So I try to do both. Like I think we are all about the number, not all about the numbers, but like we really hang with those numbers. Like, look at this trajectory over time.
Right.
And I always have to remind myself, like a lot of our staff don't feel that way. So if I can just give that one anecdote of like, so-and-so, for example, we have two sisters who, I'm of course not mentioning their names or anything like that, but they tragically lost their father a couple of years ago. So sad. And a teacher kept saying something about it. And so I dug into it some and she cares. She's trying so hard. And then when I look back at it, last year, their attendance was the one sister, at least, that has this teacher, 47% was her attendance last year. Well, the year right before that, she had lost her father tragically, 47%. Now she's at 67%. So I pulled that child in here and I sent mom a very nice email. Mom is someone who does email with me some, and it was all celebratory. I was like, hey, we're going to get there. We're going to get you where you need to be.
Yeah.
But I need you to know you are here at least one more day every week, et cetera, et cetera. And she just lit up, because this child was talking about how she's frustrated that she doesn't understand the math sometimes. I said, well, yeah, no surprise. But look at how hard you're trying. Look at how much you've improved this year, because look at how much more you're here. So I turned it into a whole positive. But that one little story is something I can walk around this whole building and say, did you know? Did you know? Did you realize? And nobody's going to fight me on that. They're going to go, and I'm not all about that number of 90%, right? I'm looking at this individual child who I love, and I can say, wow, look at how much you're improving. And even if she doesn't get there till after she's gone, that's a data point that's always going to count against us. But I'm seeing a child who's growing. I'm seeing a family who's managing their emotions through some trauma. That's what we deal with. Right.
It's fascinating, Christopher. I had a school, it was quite a number of years ago, but they were putting in some really targeted and strategic tiered supports within the school and building out what we refer to as a collaborative response, which is like an MTSS-like system of structures. And they had academic growth and their survey data was growing. But they said one of the most powerful things they did is they took a child that everyone in the building knew and said, 3 years ago, and they had the picture of the kid. They said, here are the supports we had in place for this child 3 years ago. And there was their classroom teacher and an educational assistant, a couple other things. And then they said, today, let's take a look at all the supports we have in place for this child. And it was massive. There's this team that's focusing on, it was substantial. And they said that was their staff going, oh my goodness, look at what we're doing. And this was still a child that had significant needs within the school. But to be able to say this would not have happened without the work that we've done, they said it was powerful. And again, it's that individual story that needs to come along with the overall data picture too.
Yeah. I wrote some of that down because that's as we wrap up the year. I like to do like a second to last day of school. Last day of school, everyone's just gone, right?
Yeah.
When the kids walk out, the staff do too. Good for them. Have a nice summer. But the day before, I like to get in some little, go to like a panaderia and get some pan dulce, like just some sweets for everybody, and just say, hey, let's celebrate this. Let's celebrate this.
Yeah.
Now we say nothing's perfect. It's kind of like a ball of clay. It gets a little mashed, and then we got to reform it. But look at all the things we've accomplished together. And we got about 17 days of school left or so. So we're gearing up for that. So I'm gonna use something like that. I'm gonna say, take so and so for example. You realize just a couple of years ago, blah, blah, blah. Now look at blah, blah, blah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so cool. And you're right that having those stories attached is just, it makes
Yeah.
all the difference in the world. And we're doing a detriment if we ignore the fact that we are talking about individual students and little people. I mean, they're not numbers, they're little people. So it's any chance we get to bring in those stories is so important. So as we start to wrap up, we've talked a little bit about how you'll be at the summit, which is, we're excited about that. How else could people get in touch with you? I know you're pretty active on LinkedIn, and I love the stuff that you post, but share how people can find you on LinkedIn and anywhere else that you'd like.
Yeah, so LinkedIn, obviously, like you said, if you search for Chris Graves, you'll my face will pop up. I mean, there's enough of us with different names that, there might be a few of us, but hopefully with 1 or 2 degrees removed of connections. But the other main way is gravesdi.com. Graves, just DI for Graves Data Insights, gravesdi.com. You go there, you fill out the little contact form and reach out to me. I'm always looking to expand the ways I work with people. So if you're in Illinois and you're in a district somewhere, I offer a couple different Illinois Administrator Academy courses. But outside of that, I'm always like, it looks different in every state, and I'd love to either provide support in that way in different states, but really just like you're talking about in this podcast, like just being connected and sharing the learning with one another is where my passion is. So even just a phone call while we're commuting, just to be thought partners, I think that's where Jessica and I first connected, and then Janelle McClenahan and a few others that are at the summit. I know that the data-wise and systems-wise people, Adam Parrott-Sheffer is someone here in Chicago. So I think we always have our thought partners. If I need to run something by somebody, so who am I going to call? And that's kind of what I like to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to mention too that we put your information in the show notes. So if you're looking for that, an email address or that website, we have it in the show notes as well.
Great.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's been great connecting with you today, Christopher. Thank you so much for taking
so much,
time.
Chris.
Yeah, thank
you.
Thanks.
So that was such a fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore the idea that Chris is really taking the qualitative data that we understand and know about relationships, about families, about students. And he kept talking about watching and observing and listening in that qualitative side, and then looking at the quantitative side to be able to create that balance and understand that our response needs to include both sets of information.
Yeah, I agree. And that was one of the things that Chris and I first connected on. We've known each other for probably over a year. I just looked back, and he's presented at all 3 of the summits so far. He's presented at the first 2, and he's presenting at this one as well. And his session is always one of the fan favorites. People love hearing about solutions to chronic absenteeism because that's a big problem right now. But of course, we connected through both being from Chicago, but also teaching in urban education in Chicago and dealing with a lot of trauma and some things that not every school situation is different. Every school situation is dealing with different things, and really working to bring in that culture and the positive learning environment, and kind of mesh that with the data that we have, and create a more a better environment for learning. It speaks to my soul because I've been there, and that's part of what made me love teaching and love education. So,
and I going back to that absenteeism component, I don't know if all the viewers and listeners caught this, but it was something really subtle when Chris said, and we defined chronic absenteeism as missing 10% or more. And I wonder how many schools we start tackling a issue that we want to do, but we haven't clearly defined what we mean by that. And so I think even just starting off with and he called it year zero. In our year zero, if we've said absenteeism is an issue, let's clearly define what we would see as moderate absenteeism, chronic absenteeism, and get really clear on that. Because until we're clear on that, then it's hard to respond to the data that we're collecting
Well, and
as
then we are creating that common language so that we
Yeah.
can really understand what we're looking at when we start to examine the data.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I know in Ohio and in Illinois and most states, it might even be a federal thing here, is that we define chronic absenteeism as 10%, but most of the time we have some kind of um, truancy committee or something
Yeah.
that's working on that. And it's often that the rest of the staff doesn't understand they don't understand the numbers behind it. Or sometimes we
Mhm.
also run into the issue where like once they reach that 10%, then they become truancy committee and
Yeah.
they're no longer something that I need to work on. So again, it goes back to having that plan that shows, here are all the different pieces and here's how everyone can help to make sure that our students are successful and here.
And to us, in relation to our collaborative response work, this is a clear indication of now we're tiering students where we're saying, okay, based on the data, they fit this tier, and now there's someone else's responsibility, where we want to get to a place of no, no, no. They're all our responsibility. I have a role to play. And yeah, the truancy board might be involved as well, but this is not a handoff. There's still things I can be doing. And we talk about this through the tiering of supports that at a tier 1 level, and we've worked with some schools that have created attendance continuums of support where they've become really clear on what are the things we will all do to support positive attendance in our building. And we're going to make sure that that's accounted for first before we ever look at more intensive tiers of support.
And the focus is on support,
right?
Not that reactive, punitive side of what happens through attendance.
Exactly.
Well, and I really loved, and I think this is a great reminder for everyone of if you're focusing on many things, you're probably not focusing on anything. Focus on one thing that we're going to try and really move the needle on.
And in addition to that, just how he would break things down to one small aspect that I can have a conversation with family, or I can have a conversation with a teacher about that one small aspect. But in the bigger picture of things, contributes to the success that they're seeing.
So, Jess, at the summit, I'm talking about 5 mistakes leaders make as one of the breakouts, and I'll give you the preview that the first one I see is when there's not a clear connection between priorities and the data we're collecting. And it goes along with what Chris is saying is one thing. If we've said attendance is something we're really paying attention to and trying to move the needle on, then we're crystal clear on our priorities. Now it makes total sense what data we should be collecting. If people don't have clarity on their priorities, then we're collecting everything, which then gets people really overwhelmed and quite frankly confused on what are we collecting, why are we collecting it, what are we trying to move forward on.
Well, and really creating that alignment again, right? We've used that word quite a bit over the last those episodes, but that alignment is such an important piece.
Yeah, and once you get good at that one thing, chances are it's going to spiral and start to influence some of the other things as well. Attendance also obviously influences academic success, and if you're working on culture, that's going to have an effect on attendance and academics, and all these things build on each other. So, pick one thing, stick to it for a while, figure it out, and then you'll notice that it'll start to snowball, which is awesome.
Well, and it's like we were sharing previously of you start with the one thing, start simple, and then we can layer on the next thing and the next thing when we're ready. We can get to something that is highly complex, but we don't start there.
Absolutely.
Start simple. And I think Chris gave great understanding of that, focusing in on the one thing. Again, I loved his start at year 0 and go from there.
Yep, absolutely. And just a reminder that he will be presenting on chronic absenteeism for the 3rd time, which is, again, super exciting, at 3 p.m. Eastern on June 10th, our first day. So we're ready.
Excellent. So make sure you check out the show notes. We'll have Chris's contact information, the website that he had, and more information about the Data in Education Summit that's coming June 10th and 11th. So excited for it, Jess. And this 7 speakers in 7 days has been such a fantastic learning experience.
I agree. All right. See you guys later.
Take care,
See you
everyone.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Kurtis and Lorna Hewson, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.